Garfield, one of the most recognisable faces in cartoon history turned horror fanfiction. Now, since its creation in 1978, Garfield has become a household name, spawning a ton of merchandise, a few video games, and of course, movies. Now, as awful as the live-action Garfield movies are, I'm not going to be talking about them. I've really gone down the rabbit hole of obscurity for this one. Today, we're going to be talking about Garfield Fun Fest. Garfield Fun Fest is the second in a series of animated straight-to-DVD Garfield movies directed by Mark A.Z. Mark A.Z. Dippy. Now, you're probably wondering how I've heard of these movies. Pure luck. I watched them as a child and I thought they were cool. But now, rewatching them to see how they hold up, I don't know what to say. And don't even get me started on the third movie. Jesus Christ, what the fuck am I looking at? This movie was produced by Paws Incorporated in cooperation with the Animation Picture Company. One of the most creative names I've ever heard for an animation company. Basically, all you need to know is that this is one of the weirdest movies you'll ever see. So, without further ado, let's watch it. So the film starts out in this picture book setting and tells a story of a frog called Freddy.
There lived a frog named Freddy. Freddy was no ordinary frog. Okay, he was sort of ordinary. Freddy was the first funny frog. Not only was he the first funny frog, he was the first funny anything.
It states that the pond water that Freddy lived in made him funny, and if anyone were to drink it, they'd also be funny.
He took a sip, and he became funny.
Yeah, and the ability to fucking levitate, apparently.
This was the story
of the creation of humor. And they all lived happily ever after the end. Let's eat!
Tonight's the big talent show.
I know.
It's Fun Fest.
I know.
But this year I feel it, Garfield. This is my year.
As you can probably tell already, the lip syncing in this film is atrocious. I mean, at some points it's okay.
Read my lips. If it ain't broke, don't fix it, okay?
But at others...
You're too young and too short to perform with pros like us.
And guess what I'm going to do for Fun Fest this year?
That same dance routine you've been doing since 1978?
The same dance routine I've been doing since 1978.
John, that might have had a good chance of winning if it weren't for the whole, disco is dead thing.
What? Was that supposed to be a joke? This will happen a lot in this movie, so just keep your eye out. So if you haven't already gathered, all the main characters are getting ready for a talent show called Funfest, the biggest talent show in the town, and each character has their own act that they're going to perform.
What are you going to do for your talent this year, Normal?
I am so glad you asked.
Oh, boy.
Air guitar solo. Fun Fest.
Shut your fucking mouth! No problem, John. Shut the fuck up, you cunt!
So,
Pipsqueak.
Fatso,
Pipsqueak.
Fatso.
Are we there yet?
I think they gave that line to the wrong character. He's the driver. I hope he'd know if they were there yet. Another really strange thing about not just this film, but all the other films in general, is the weird sexual tension between Garfield and the weird dinner lady.
You ever thought of just letting your hair down?
Nah.
I'll bet you'd be a heartbreaker, baby cakes. Zelda, Zelda, Zelda. I swear, are those stars I see in your eyes?
What are you talking about?
Don't disappoint your fans, okay?
Now, there is basically no consistency throughout any of these movies, but the one consistency they choose to keep in is the sexual tension between the greasy lady and the orange cat. I mean, it just makes sense. So it's explained to us that the winner of FunFest will get their comic strip on the top of the comics page, and that Garfield has won every year. More unfunny jokes later, and we find out that this movie is going to be really secretive on who the twist villain is going to be. I mean, I just wonder who it could be. Who is the twist villain? Anyway, back to the story. Arlene is still pushing Garfield to do a dance with her for FunFest, and then out of nowhere, Ramon appears. I'm sorry, but I just have to ask, what the fuck? So, anyway, Ramon ends up doing the dance with Arlene in the practice act because Garfield doesn't want to, and they end up doing really well whilst Garfield ends up doing awfully in his stand-up routine because he doesn't have Arlene with him. This causes him to think he's lost his humour, so he tries to find a way to get it back. The next day, Odie finds a letter in the picture book from earlier in the movie and gives it to Garfield, which turns out to be a map to the funny water, so they set off to try and find it. Next, unfunny clip later, and they finally make it to the magic forest where they find a big tree and yet another extremely annoying character.
Woo, woo, woo! Stand back there, sir.
Pardon?
You may not enter the mystical forest until you have seen the informational presentation.
Will you shut up, man? Listen,
So, for some reason, and out of nowhere, the squirrel turns out to somehow be magical and can make Garfield teleport back to him if he doesn't answer his question correctly. Why? This is never brought up again, by the way, and no other character in this show seems to have powers like these. Only when Garfield answers the question correctly does he let him through. Which then brings us on to the most annoying character in this movie.
Pick a card, any card.
And diamonds.
You, sir, are absolutely correct. Woo! Give it up for the bear. Go bear, go bear.
why are we still here? Just to suffer?
Being funny should come natural, like with my junior here.
So, Junior, do we go right or left?
To get to the magic pond tonight, follow your heart, and you'll always be right.
So they figure out pretty much immediately that the answer is left because the heart is on the left side of your body, and if you follow your heart, you go left. So you really have to ask yourself, why did any of this have to happen? So then they come across these alligators who won't let them pass the river, and we're introduced to even more annoying characters. They tell Garfield that to get across they need to make the alligators laugh, and they'd be so preoccupied with laughing that they'd be able to cross without them seeing them. But then Garfield brings up a pretty good point.
But what if they stop laughing before we get all the way across?
Which the birds don't really seem to answer. One just says,
is that a defeatist attitude can be pervasive in its negative impact on the outcome of one's mission.
Which honestly just translates to, stop being negative or you won't get across, which doesn't answer his question, and the other just goes,
Poopy, poopy, poopy head.
Have I mentioned yet that this movie is a comedic riot? I'm sure you can tell that already though by the clips that I'm showing you. Long story short, Odie does some weird stupid thing and it makes them laugh, and then they get across. Next scene. They finally see the funny water pond, but they get stopped by yet another character, who, pretty much like every character in this movie so far, is just there to waste time and pad it out.
I came to drink the funny water.
Who doesn't? And why do you want to drink the funny water?
Because I'm not funny anymore?
Do you do impressions?
Of course. Any requests?
Do a cat.
Meow?
I'm not convinced. Drink a lot of funny water.
There's not even any jokes or lessons in this part, which I'll get onto later in the video. He just stops them to be a dick and then just lets them through. So they finally get to the funny pond where they find the one and only Freddy Frog. He then explains he will have to give them humorous enlightenment before they can drink the funny water. To teach them this humorous enlightenment, he shows them a stick and how anything can be a prop in comedy, and then proceeds to be really unfunny.
Who ordered the frozen snake? How long have you been on this diet, sir?
Have I mentioned that this movie is unfunny yet? Look, I know comedy is subjective, but I can't see anyone ever laughing at this movie. None of the jokes are even jokes, they're just things that happen periodically for no reason, but the movie builds them up as if they're really funny. Freddy traps Garfield over a bridge and begins to drown him until Garfield admits he's fat and makes fun of himself. What is going on?
Remember, it's better for someone to have laughed at your expense than never to have laughed at all.
What does that even mean? That doesn't make any sense. Freddy then finally explains that they moved the funny water years ago and that it's on top of this huge mountain.
Is nothing easy?
Nothing worth having.
I reckon not.
Then instantly Garfield just climbs to the top of it somehow and is greeted by Freddy again, who tells him that he could have just taken the elevator.
You didn't tell me there was an elevator?
You didn't ask.
What?
Humor is all about questions, Donut Hopper. Why did the chicken cross the road? Hey, why the long face? Anyone here from Cleveland?
This is a kid's movie. What kid is gonna laugh at that? What adult is gonna laugh at that? Freddy lets Garfield drink the funny water and gives them a hang glider to get them back to Funfest. But it's too late. Ramon had stolen Garfield's spot and he's left a mope outside where he meets Freddy again. And this is where the movie becomes slightly confusing, so stay with me. Freddy explains to Garfield that the funny water doesn't make people funny and it's all placebo. He tells him that it wasn't the funny water but in fact the journey that taught him how to be funny.
Stan the Squirrel taught you to be honest with your audience. Junior the Bear taught you to follow your heart. And the alligators, humility.
Now, I do 100% realise I'm nitpicking at a kid's movie and I'm completely wasting my time and my life, but let's get into it. First of all, the squirrel never taught Garfield to be honest with himself. He forced Garfield to tell the truth, and Garfield only did it to move on to the next part of his journey to get what he wanted. He never even acknowledged at the time that he even told the truth. The bear didn't teach him to follow his heart. He told him to follow the positioning of his heart, which is his left. So he taught him to always go left. Next, and the most confusing how they even got it wrong, the crocodiles never taught him humility. Freddy did. Second, the lesson they were given was to act stupid and make stupid jokes to make the alligators laugh so they could get through. Third, the crocodiles didn't teach them anything. If anything, it was the birds who were teaching them. I don't understand how they could get something like this so wrong. It's like they never rewatched a single part of the movie after they made it and just stitched it together afterwards. So then anyway, Garfield learns to follow his heart and the climax ensues with Garfield and Ramon fighting over Arlene until finally it's revealed that it was normal all along. 5 stars, what a twist, never saw it coming. But what was Normal's plan here? Was it to get with Arlene? Well, that can't be it because she'd find out eventually it wasn't him. Was it to get back at Garfield? But Garfield doesn't even know it was Normal. He just knows it's some random guy called Ramon. What was his name? Anyway, Garfield wins. He dances with Arlene. They kiss and the movie ends. The happy ever after. Wow, this movie was weird. Not only does it have nothing to do with Garfield, but it doesn't really have anything to do with anything. It's so strange. It feels like a parody of something, but it just doesn't exist. There are just huge flaws with this movie as well, on such basic levels. Such as characters being introduced just to blatantly pad out the film in its runtime. Having some of the most annoying characters I've ever seen in a film. And with just so many other problems, this movie is it's a fucking mess.